So now looking at this draft class as a whole, this is what we're going to get into next here, Oliver. Most people would say they look at this class and they're just not that excited about the talent that is within the 2024 class. And you look at the names, you look at the film, and it really reinforces that point. I mean, there's no Wemby in this class. Like, that's clear. You don't see people doing things that you've never seen on a basketball court before. That's kind of left last year in the 23 draft. For this year, however, we talked about this a little bit earlier. It does seem to be multiple players here, especially as you kind of go down the list a little bit. You look at guys that you can plug in. There's a few prospects here that are a little bit older. I'm sure we'll talk about a couple of those guys here shortly, but a little bit older players. I think of like Jaime Jaquez Jr. for the Heat. The role that he had this year, they plugged him in. He was a great fit for the system, and he was immediately a contributor. There are multiple players here that, if the correct team picks that player, brings them into an atmosphere that kind of amplifies their skill set, it can be something like that, to where they're just instantly a contributor and they have a really great impact on their team. Some of these teams, yeah, they're in the lottery, so it won't really impact their win total that much right now. But other teams might be on the fringes and they get that little boost they need to get back in the play-in tournament or the playoffs. So really something I've been wondering is, like, is it as bad? Like, there's a lot of press that's negative about this class. But I guess my question here is it as bad as people make it out to be in terms of the overall strength of this class? Well, we've seen weak classes in the past. We've seen that. I think it was the 2013 draft. You had Bennett and you had Oladipo. I think Otto Porter was third, and you had like multiple players. Like, none of them turned out to be even really like superstar players in that draft. So, in your opinion, is it overblown as far as the how this draft is shaking out in terms of the overall potential here, or do you think that there's a silver lining here and maybe it's not? I guess it's like, hey, is it that bad, or do you see it being better than people would make it out to be?
My short answer is it is not that bad. It is. I think it is getting blown a little bit out of proportion. There are good players in every draft. Every draft, you're going to get at least like one or two all-stars at the bare minimum. If you look back in history, but with this class specifically, like I said, there isn't necessarily a cornerstone franchise piece, but I mean, there are so many valuable positions to be had in the NBA that work around those players. And trust me, they get paid great too. It's not, Josh Hart is like the perfect example. And there are players in this class who get compared to Josh Hart and a TJ McConnell. A lot of the Tyler Kolek comps to TJ McConnell. I've been hearing a lot of Steph Castle comps to Josh Hart. And those are two players who I view as first-round prospects on different ends of the spectrum, first-round wise. But they're going to have the opportunity. They do project to have that level of impact on the game. And I think after a while, especially after these playoffs, but you see it throughout the year, I pretty much damn near all 30 teams, I bet, would want a Josh Hart on their roster right now with what he's been bringing to the table for the Knicks.
Absolutely.
And to TJ McConnell. I mean, those dudes are so gritty and hard work and grittiness fits. That fits in anywhere. It doesn't matter. And yeah, the list goes on with impact role players in these playoffs. Andrew Nembhard is another one who's had a similar path as a prospect where he wasn't as was in a touted program in Gonzaga, but still came into everything with a chip on his shoulder. It still felt like he had things to prove, and he's making the most of it on this stage right now. There are plenty of players in this class who are going to be able to fill those roles. not only like in the NBA in the regular season, but that are going to become relevant in the playoffs sooner rather than later, I think.
Yep.
And then when those guys start popping off, then people will be revisiting was this class, down or whatever, and it'll be interesting to check some of those receipts. But yeah, long story short, that's my take on that.
Oliver, you bring up these gritty players like Josh Hart and McConnell, and it makes me think of a phrase that we hear a lot, not just in the basketball circle, but I guess in sports in general. They have that dog in them. You know what I mean? Like you hear that all the time. Like they have that dog in them. Like they have that spirit of just competitiveness. They have that fire, and it's funny because I go to the Ringers mock draft. They have their mock draft. They have their big board every year. Kevin O'Connor works on that, and one of the badges for a player is he's got that dog in him. And I've seen that over the past couple of years, but I've really been paying attention to that this year. In this year's class, because like you said, there's multiple players in the playoff setting on the highest level that are displaying that kind of fire. And I mean, you think of like a Reed Shepherd, that could be that type of guy. Like he's smaller in stature, 6'2", 6'3", a smaller guard, but he has that quality in him. Ron Holland, I know you're not as high on the G League Ignite guys, but he seems to have a fire about him as well, like a spirit of competitiveness. And those are things you can't really teach in the game of basketball. You can teach shooting rhythm. You can teach the handle, get your handle right. You can teach X's and O's, but you can't really teach effort and that competitiveness. It just kind of comes from within. You have to have it to really be that type of guy that can really prosper on the highest level. Like some have it, some don't. And through the highest levels of basketball, we see who has that. So I'm really interested to see how those type of players specifically fare in the NBA, especially if they get drafted to certain teams. Are they going to have that drive to continue to just grind it out? Let's say like they're a higher lottery pick, they're top 10, and they go to a team like Washington or Charlotte that's had very little success over the past several years. The franchises just don't have much to show for their multiple years of just being an NBA franchise. Like, are they going to kind of take that spirit and bring it with them to a team that's not expected to do anything? That's something I'm really kind of keying in on. I really want to see. But I want to bring up another point about this class that's interesting. Not just the fact that it's weak, quote unquote, compared to other draft classes, but just the fact that there doesn't seem to be any kind of consensus among evaluators. So you'll go look at one mock draft and they have this top 10. You go to another mock draft and the top 10 is like jumbled up. Maybe Alex Sarr is number one between the two, but then after that, it's kind of like, the players are kind of all over the place. So, is this something that's new to you? Is this something that you're seeing for the first time in terms of just everybody kind of has a different opinion on who their top prospects are? Or is that also something that's blown out of proportion that we actually do see a little bit more of in other drafts than we're kind of letting on right now?
Yeah. I mean, look, I haven't been doing this for that long. I'm a pretty young dude. So I don't have a ton of I can't go back in history that far. Personally, I haven't seen it this open as long as I've been, covering the draft as seriously as I have been, as closely as I have been. But I mean, the closest thing I can think of was, and we touched on it not long ago, was that 2013 class, where Anthony Bennett went number one. Like, I can't, me if I'm wrong, but I don't know how many other organizations had Anthony Bennett that high on their board. So clearly there wasn't full consensus back then. So that's like the farthest back I can stretch. Yeah, no, it definitely is. The lack of consensus is real this year, and it's pretty great, especially the timing of it too, because there was a recent change within the new CBA where draft prospects can't really duck the combine anymore, and the combine is going on as we speak. So before, highly touted prospects would get advice from their agents to hold out, because it's always the conversation of, listen, man, like, you don't have much to gain here, only things to lose. You're going to have a massive target on your back. Everyone's going to be hunting you. Stay home.
Yep.
And so now, unless you're currently in season or you're hurt, these prospects are all required to go and participate in the combine, unless you're so like Zach Riesesche is still in his season at JL Borg, so he won't be in Chicago this week. All that to say that the players are giving themselves up completely, and they're not able to duck any more smoke. Just like how scouting departments this year are not going to be able to duck any smoke in terms of just following consensus and following what's just out there in the media. And people are going to get held accountable for these picks this year. You're going to, especially as the draft gets later on, like, you're going to see over time which scouting departments have their shit together and which we're throwing shit at a fan, throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. Yeah, I'm excited to see all that play out. And again, I think the timing of it was just interesting, because just like the way prospects are fully, giving themselves up to the process, so too are evaluators. So
yeah,
funny timing.
Very, very good points there, Oliver. It's definitely a fascinating class. And I think even though this class doesn't have overall strength of others, it's a very good case study, because like you said, like, to make really good picks in this draft and to be a really solid evaluator, like, I mean, it's going to expose people, because it's kind of like, hey, everybody has something different. So we're going to see who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. It's just kind of like a free for all in a sense. So that's very, very interesting.